Have you ever found yourself wanting to pick up a new genre and not knowing where to start? Could be you. In that case, we've got you covered. My name is Jess.
My name is Hannah.
And today we bring you beginner books for new genres. These books are going to get you hooked. They're going to drag you in, and they will never let you go. So, this is your intro to contemporary, to romance, to horror, to fantasy, whatever may have you, etc., etc. Let's go. How are you, though? Let's start there.
I'm good.
You gonna expand? Just, nope, that's it. I'm good. How are you?
The real answer is that I'm out here fighting for my life, okay? It's final season. You asked me how I am and my brain just went blank.
We've all been there. I could see it on your face.
I couldn't even.
I just went, oh, she's buffering.
I couldn't even say I'm good with a straight face. I'm surviving. I'm alive. I'm breathing. Mm-hmm. I'm having a good time. I'm feeling very loved and blessed and fortunate because it was just my birthday yesterday, and
Woo!
All of my friends and family made it so lovely, and I was gifted a lot of really lovely things, including a brand new Kindle, so I'm excited. I know, I'm so excited. I'm going to decorate it tonight. I'll send you pictures. But
yay.
So there's all that, but then at the same time, classes are done in the next few days. And then it's just studying for midterms, and I just have to pass them. Oh my God. Editing Hannah here, just to point out that that's how you know how rough this final season was, because I just fully called it midterms and did not notice. So, all that to say, I did pass, and everything is fine now, but let me tell you, at the time, shit was rough, okay? And I feel like that is so painfully obvious, and I'm so sorry. But you know what? I passed. So, anyways, proceed. And so we're vibing. We're doing our best. We're reading to break up the studying. So that's been going well. I finished The Hobbit the other day.
Nice.
I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, but it was fun. I'll still read The Lord of the Rings because I gotta.
Fair.
But
yeah,
it was okay. And yeah, that's all I really got going on. What about you? How are you?
I have accidentally become important at work, so that's going well. I actually love my job. It's really cool. I do a lot of really cool things, but
you've accidentally become important at work.
Yeah. I special interested so close to the sun, and now I've got a really important job. So
okay, did your responsibilities just change or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I accidentally became important at work.
Well, that's good. Congratulations, I think.
Yeah. Basically, I'm playing a more active role in getting women pregnant. So I'm making babies. It's going great.
I love that for you. Congratulations. Somehow that seems so on brand.
Never thought I'd be here, but yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly I can't imagine you doing anything else.
Gone are the cheese factory days.
Yes.
May I just say that?
God, the cheese factory days were crazy.
I know. Yeah, my lore is just out of this world sometimes. But
yep.
I've been reading lots. I've been getting more into the series this year.
I saw that.
Yeah, in a number of different ways. I'm 2 out of 3 books through a sci-fi trilogy. Both of them have been 4 stars so far, so that's been really cool. I binged different sci-fi trilogy, the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. So that was crazy. It was so good. I didn't realize it was actually like a really important series in the sci-fi community, and then I found out there was a movie, and I watched that, and it was great. And I'm also learning to appreciate audiobooks, and I'm attributing that to the fact that I drive now.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like I was in a bit of a slump in March, but because there are 2 days out of the week where I have to drive to school, and it's like an hour and a half each way because I work right afterwards. And yeah, like all of my reading was just audiobooks in the car because I listen on like 1.75 speed, and then just like I'm done in like a few days. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Turns a 20-hour book into 12.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So, doing good.
That's great. I'm so glad. I'm so happy that you're into audiobooks now as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Speaking of which, we need to discuss the fact that there was not one, but 2 accidental buddy reads last month.
I know, that was so crazy. And I didn't even notice at first because I was reading, I had started the Thursday Murder Club. Let's talk about that one
and
first.
I didn't even know that.
Let's talk about that one first.
Yeah, because that one was purely by accident.
That was crazy because I was actively reading it, and then
the other one was kind of an Irish buddy read. It was back to back.
Yeah. But what happened with the Thursday Murder Club is I was reading it, and then I had stopped, and I guess somehow, like, you had also started it, but you started it after me, but then somehow got ahead of me, and since you were using my Audible account, I got in my car the next day, and turned it on, and then it's like, chapter 84, I was like, that's not where I was. So I'm like, let me make sure I'm not getting hacked really quick. I just sent you a message like, hey girl, are you reading the Thursday Murder Club right now? Because I completely lost my place. I had no idea. I had to figure it out.
I'm so sorry.
Well, you didn't know. You didn't know that I was reading it. Because up until that point, you had been behind me. And so, like, why would you notice?
Yeah.
But yeah, chapter 84, I was like, that doesn't sound right. But yeah, it was cool. What'd you think of it?
I thought it was fun. I really liked the narrator for it, the like old British lady.
Yeah.
I thought that was just great. I really enjoyed, I apologize, I do not remember the character names and who's who. However, the old woman that just knows everything and she's just right about everything and just like finds all the answers. Love her. Yeah, she was my kind of girl.
She's a badass. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was a spy. Heavily implied.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love how she's just like prim about it all.
Yeah, she's just like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And so, carrying on.
And I'm right about it.
Yeah. Let me just solve this murder casually really quick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And like, even like the criminals discussing her, they were just like, sure, you can hide from the cops. No doubt. However, are you sure you can hide from Elizabeth? Because I have my doubts. I've got my reservations there. And he's just like, maybe.
Are you sure you can hide
from
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny.
That was my favorite part of the entire book.
Yeah, I really liked, oh gosh, the dad of the fighter. It starts with an R.
My first thought was Richard, but I was like, no, that's the author.
Yeah. Why can't I remember his name? I love him. Anyways.
It's so hard to remember names with audiobooks.
Yeah, it is, because you're not seeing them every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But, him, I loved him. He was just like so like no muss, no fuss, like calling it like it is. Like he was just such a funny character, and I liked him a lot.
Also, I been putting my audiobooks into my book log as well, since, I can't have them as my serial killer trophy like my physicals.
Yeah.
And so the quote that I wrote down for this book was, "An immaculately dressed woman in her 80s had a point to make." And that's really all it's about.
That is really all it's about. Yeah. Yeah. But then, like, the narrator, I forget her name too. She, like, how she's so, like, quiet and unassuming and everyone underestimates her, but, like, she's aware of that and she kind of uses it to her advantage and is, like, kind of, like sneaky, but not in a bad way, like, not in, like, for any nefarious reasons, but, like, she's just so, like, quietly strong, and I like her a lot for that too. Yeah. And then the plot, holy.
Yeah.
Like, a lot happened.
That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
And, like, the sense of justice through all of it.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, I understand you're an old man, and I know that this was a long time ago. However, you still need to tell the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was just like, okay, but, like, it was perfectly covered up. And, like, I'm 80.
Yeah.
And they were like, 911.
But you still have to do the right thing. Like, that's kind of what the whole thing was, like, the underlying sort of tone was all about, doing the right thing.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
like,
loved
that
it.
scene in the, like, care home.
In the end, yeah.
Was,
yeah.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
Yeah.
It's such a good time. For sure. That one's not on my list for beginner books for mysteries. However, it should be.
Great one.
Yeah.
Great one.
Great one to start with if you're new to mysteries.
Yeah, if you're wanting to wade into mysteries. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a extra little one for you. And then Quicksilver, I saw that you
Kelly Hart.
I didn't know that you read it. I read it and then you read it immediately after me. You gave it 5 stars and I just want to know about that because
so because you gave me your Audible to listen to Quicksilver and I just went, I'm going to start immediately. And so I wasted no time. I listened to it in how many days? In like 4 days.
Oh wow.
And that's a long book.
That's faster than I did it, yeah.
I think I was at like 1.6 speed. So I think it was down to like 12 and a half or 13 hours. But like I just like put my whole being into it. Because I got to the point where like he brought her through the pool of Quicksilver and like you could already tell that he was hiding something. There was something else going on with that guy, but no one was going to say shit. And that just tickled my brain. Okay.
It hooked you.
And I just went, oh, a dark, mysterious man that has something to hide? Sign me up. I bet he'll hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And then I listened to all of it.
Very quickly in quick succession, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And honestly, if a book gets me to the point of excitement where I'm thinking about it when I'm not actively consuming it, it's almost always a 5-star for me.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I rate my books off vibes a lot of the time, admittedly. However, when I lose stars, it is usually because of the writing. But if it's a 5-star, it's almost always on vibes. And the vibes were indeed there. Like I was listening to it in the car. I was listening to it when I was doing dishes. I was listening to it folding laundry. I needed it. Okay.
And the narrator, oh my god.
Oh my god.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Quicksilver is a fantasy romance. It does get pretty explicit. It's definitely
maybe a little
adult.
Less beginner.
Yeah, a little less beginner. It's about this young woman who is from like this district of this sort of desert kingdom city thing that is quarantined, quote unquote.
Yeah, the lore?
Yeah, the lore
Incredible.
is crazy.
Oh my god, the lore was so good.
Yeah. So she's from this like place where basically the water is rationed, and so all the people are like dehydrated and starving and like fighting to survive basically. And she steals something from a castle guard when she is in the main part of the city, which she's not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be able to leave their district.
They're seen as like contaminated.
Yeah,
and, like,
basically. And so she gets caught, and there's like this whole like fight is occurring in the throne room, and then she all of a sudden seems to possess a little bit of magic. And she accidentally opens a portal through which a fey male just emerges and decides that for some reason he is going to rescue her because he like recognizes that she was the one to like open this portal, and then everything ensues from there. So she gets whisked away to this like fey realm, and then that's where things really hit the fan. So and I was shocked that you gave it 5 stars, because fantasy is not your genre. I did not give it 5 stars. I have some issues with it.
It's been growing on me.
I can tell.
Yeah. My current read is also fantasy. It is for the pod, but I have admittedly been looking forward to it. And it's going swimmingly, might I add.
Great.
It's going so well. I cannot wait for you to read it.
On my new Kindle.
And so, on your new Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited. And so, yeah, I definitely do lean towards the fantasy that, you know, is still pretty explicit in the violence.
Yeah, darker fantasy.
Because, darker fantasy. Because that's just, it scratches the itch in my brain. I know I use that term a lot. I'm so annoyed with myself at this moment. However, the point still stands because my brain is itchy and it just gets it. Okay?
Well, I believe we in the community call that the tism.
We do.
Yeah, itchy brain.
Itchy brain. So, yeah. Fantasy has been seeping its way into my repertoire more and more.
So excited for that. And if you...
So is romance, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them.
I literally told you 2 years ago that
I know
that you are a fantasy and dark romance girly. I can tell.
However, you know what else sucks with the tism? Change.
You didn't want anything
and
new.
I was not having it.
No, you were not having it. I tried so hard and you were like, no. And then I fully just...
My life was too turbulent for too long, and I needed to like fully settle down first.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I waited and bided my time, and then I asked you if you wanted to do a podcast. Now here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, this has just all been my whole scheme to get you to read fantasy.
Yeah. And now we're going to get other people to read fantasy.
Yes, we're going to get into the genres. If you would like to join us in any of our genre obsessions, we've got some suggestions for where to start for you. Oh my god, what a lovely segue. That was awesome.
Yes. With that, would you like to start with fantasy?
Absolutely, I will. So, basically, we're just going to go through. I'm not going to give you like in-depth description of every single book, because I feel like I can just give like a general impression, and then I'm going to explain why I think that these books specifically are good for people just starting in these genres. Because I've had that so much before. Like, I used to be strictly a mystery thriller person, and since then I've switched genres so many times and I've tried so many new things, and so I feel like I had that sort of like lost feeling of like, where do I start? Because there's so much.
In the past 24 episodes, our 40 listeners have experienced me accepting 2 new genres. So I feel like, you know what? If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah, and we're going to make it super easy for you by telling you where to start. So.
Exactly. And this is like, it's not often that we have a relatively spoiler-free-ish episode. So.
Yeah.
Buckle up. Buckle up.
Here we go. So, my first genre, that's one of my faves, obviously, fantasy. So, I'm just going to get it out of the way really quick and just say that my start with fantasy was with Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I'm not going to discuss it in depth. I'm not going to go into it. I feel like we've talked about this book enough. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. By extension, A Court of Thorns and Roses, also by Sarah J. Maas as well. Like, either one of those are pretty good places to start with fantasy. Specifically, if you like romance fantasy, or if you want to get into like the like woodlands, kingdoms, fae style fantasy, because I feel like Sarah J. Maas introduces fae in a way that does not assume prior knowledge. And so she's pretty solidly in depth, and that's where I started, was with Throne of Glass. And Throne of Glass also like ACOTAR throws you right into it. Throne of Glass sort of eases into the lore of fae in a way that like you're being introduced to it as the characters are being introduced to it. And so I feel like also another thing about Throne of Glass is it has like all of the tropes of like games and trials and some of the political intrigue tropes about like martyrs and kings and gods and all of these things. Like, it's pretty digestible. And so it sort of like walks you through all of that stuff. And I feel like because I started with Throne of Glass, there was a lot of things that I could like jump right into after that. So, Throne of Glass, you're following an assassin who is pulled from this mining prison to participate in these trials to become what's called the King's Champion, which is essentially like you get to like go on special missions and stuff for the king. It's basically like they pull all of these prisoners to compete for this position to fight for their freedom after they fulfill this certain number of years contract being the king's champion, quote unquote. So that's where you start. And it just gets wild after that. And it's a long series, so it's a bit of a commitment. But anyways, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. That's my first one. I talked about that way more than I was going to. But there you are. In a similar vein, because I felt like Throne of Glass was such a basic bitch answer. I also think a good place to start is Air Awakens, which is a YA series. So the romance really is like a subplot, and it is more focused on like the political intrigue and the landscape, and specifically the magic system. So if you're new to magic systems, Air Awakens by Elise Kova is an excellent place to start, because it's about basically this, again, a young girl who is working in the library. She's a scribe, or is apprenticing to be a scribe, and so like basically she is gonna be spending the rest of her life in this library. Like, she loves libraries, she loves books, she keeps her head down, she's just sort of like going on this path, and so she's a relatively normal girl, quote unquote. And when the prince is injured, she also has a major crush on one of the princes. There's more than one prince. She has a major crush on one of the princes. One of the princes is injured in some quest he was on, and it is up to the scribes to go through the library to basically find a magical cure of some kind, or some kind of healing cure for whatever's ailing this prince. And she like throws herself into it because she thinks it's the prince that she has a thing for. And so she's like super motivated to try and like save him because she cares very deeply for him. And so she like throws herself into it. But there's something a little odd about her notes. And things start happening. Oh. And so she gets swept up by this magic system and thrown into like an entirely different school, pulled from the library. Like, her life is basically turned upside down overnight because of these like crazy notes that she wrote. And so it's basically like, that's another reason why I think it's a good beginner book, because you're following a relatively normal person who is uprooted and thrown into this fantasy, magical, political intrigue landscape. So it's like,
just like you are as a new fantasy reader.
Exactly. So I feel like Air Awakens is good for that. Also, like, it doesn't follow that trope of like the badass female main character who's like somehow so like tiny and petite, but also is skilled in sword, like like in sword fighting, and like she can like kill him at like she's so not like she's clumsy and she's normal, and she's spent her life reading in the library, and she wants nothing to do with any of this. And
Same.
so it doesn't just follow that like that those tropes of like these like somehow 17-year-olds who are like skilled and powerful enough have been like trained in like being an assassin since they were 2. Like she's not that. And so
Beautiful.
It's also sort of a coming of age as you watch her like adapt to this new thing that she gets thrown into and grow up through that as well. So I feel like it's a good place to start if you want to start with like a more epic fantasy, because there is like it's still set in another world. Then my next recommendation, we've also talked about this one before, is The Bonds That Tie by J. Bree. And y'all know what it's about. We've told you.
Just do it at this point. Just do it.
Yeah. It's essentially about this young woman in this world. It's set in our world, but there are people who have powers. They're called the Gifted. She's one of the Gifted. She, as a teenager, finds out who her bonds are. So the bonds are dates by blood testing, where they find basically the person that you are destined to spend your life with. And so the Gifted community, this is how they find their partners. And often they're bonded groups, like people, there will be one central and they often have multiple bonds. So she finds out who hers are and then inexplicably just dips, and she's gone for years. And they're like trying to track her down. They have no idea what's happened to her. They think she's run away from them. Like they don't know what's going on. And then eventually they capture her and bring her back, and she basically has to atone for like where she's been and why she ran away and like what's going on. And there's this group called the Resistance, who are the Gifted, who are not part of the main Gifted community, but are trying to like basically take over everything. And so that's where you get like the political intrigue.
Kind of like X-Men.
Yeah, a little. And it's set in our world. So that's why I say it's a good beginner, because it introduces you to magic and fated mates and those kinds of tropes, but in a landscape that's easily recognizable. And so there's not a lot to like wrap your head around in terms of like being in a different world. And so you can sort of just get thrown into it, and it's super easy to just jump on board. And also the writing style is just like you fly through it so fast. And so that's another good one to start with if you want to be like hooked with fantasy. It's, you know, you dip your toes into the fantasy with like the magic system and the politics, but it's still in our world, and it's set, the first book is set mainly at a university as well. So it's kind of like the academia type thing. So it's easily recognizable and easily relatable in a way that I think makes it a good like gateway drug into fantasy as a whole, as a genre. And J. Bree is also just an excellent writer. So
oh, she's wonderful.
yeah, so good.
Yeah.
And then my last one is Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. And I say this is a good beginner book because this is really good as an intro to world building for another world, because there's a lot of things about the world in this book that are similar to our world, but there is still enough differences and vivid sort of landscapes and like the travel, like there's a lot of movement around the landscape. There's a map in the front of the book. And this book is not like it'll change your life, but I do think it does a really good job of introducing, again, like the fantasy world and the fantasy space. That one's about a Queen's Guard who is sent to not enemy territory per se, but they're not on the best of terms. And she's sent there with her fellow guards to track down a fugitive. And they run into a whole bunch of obstacles along the way. So that's another thing, is like the plot is fairly easy to follow. Like there's not a ton going on, but the world is very vivid, and it does a good job of introducing as well, like the lore of this place that they're going to and things like that. So if like for lore and world building, it's a really good place to start. It's also a good place to start if like you've not read anything else, then maybe it will change your life. But like if you're already into fantasy, Dance of Thieves is like not the best, but it was one of the ones
Small
that
beans.
Small beans. Yeah. But it was one of the ones that I started with, and it's YA as well. So it's like, again, the romance is more of a subplot, so it doesn't overpower the sort of like fantasy genre learning that you're doing. So I feel like that also is a good place to start.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's all that. And also The Bonds That Tie, a testament to it being a good place to start. That's where I started Jess. And
yeah, I read all of it in 2 weeks.
Yep. It
was great.
And now she's becoming a fantasy girly. So really, we have proof.
Case in point.
Yep. Case in point. Evidence.
Yeah, these are tested.
These are the good places to start. I started with Throne of Glass and Air Awakens. You started with The Bonds That Tie and Dance of Thieves. And here we are. Yeah. So that's fantasy for you. Those are my recommendations for an intro to fantasy.
Wonderful. Well, let's move into thrillers. So, if you have a Kindle, you probably have Kindle Unlimited, because who doesn't nowadays? And so, on Kindle Unlimited, I like to call her an Amazon author. And by that, I mean those authors that generally just publish on Amazon and they pump out like 6 books a year type author. And so my thriller author in that sort of boathouse is Minka Kent. And I've read about 2 or 3 of her thrillers so far. They're quick, they're easy to get through. They're like 250 to 350 pages. And she hits you with like 6 different whoas every book. It's great. Okay. So I've read Unmissing by Minka Kent. I've read When I Was You by Minka Kent. I have Stillwater Girls by Minka Kent on my TBR still. So she is a tried and true, nice way to just like wade into thrillers and like really just have a good time with it.
Okay, I had no idea about that one. I should start there.
Yeah, she's great. I love her to bits. Yeah, she's got a lot of... She's just got so many. And they're easy to get through. I read them in like 2 days usually. And yeah, the story, they are the kind that just like grip you. And then as soon as you like start getting to the point of the story where it's just like, oh shit, they are in hot water, you don't want to put it down, no matter which book it is. So, Minka Kent is a tried and true thriller author and is a wonderful starting point.
Is there like any specific title, or is it just like all of them?
So far, all of them.
Okay.
So you could really start anywhere with her, which is why I'm kind of going broad with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've not been let down by her. And like whenever I'm just like feeling an itch for a thriller, I know that she's my girl. She was one of the first authors I discovered on Kindle, and I have not been disappointed by her yet. She's wonderful. So our girl Minka Kent, go do it.
Excellent.
Yeah, period. Another thriller is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. It is a girl who's sort of down on her luck, takes on a nannying job. The pay isn't great, but they have like a little house out in the back that she gets to stay in. That's like a little guest house. And then she's hanging out with this kid, and things are just kind of off. Okay. There's a woman that lives next door that the parents like don't trust at all, but like she seems okay to you. So why don't they like her that much? And the kid just sort of acts a little a lot sometimes. And also they draw pictures, and also the pictures are getting more realistic, and also they're depicting a woman dying in the woods. So, kind of freaky. However, great book. And it's set in a very realistic setting until it's not. Like it's still in a realistic setting, but there are definitely some like paranormal aspects to it. But they don't take away from the story, I find. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was one of the first physical thrillers that I bought, and it scratched my itchy little brain. And so here we are. Next, I have Where You End by Abbott Keller. And so this one has a set of twins, and one of them gets injured and has amnesia. Okay. And the other twin basically has to take care of her sister and like reteach her about her life. Except things aren't adding up. Things just like start popping out to the amnesia twin. And she's like, why do we only have this one photo of ourselves in our house? And her sister goes, oh, because we don't like seeing like the flipped version of ourselves in photos. It messes with our brains. And she just goes, okay.
Okay, weird.
Weird lore, but okay. And just like little things like that until it's just like, okay, where the fuck were we before that accident? So that's another great one. It was very big on Book Talk for a minute there, so you might have heard of it before. But honestly, it was one of the Book Talk recommendations that I gave 5 stars. So,
wow,
would recommend.
Cool.
So yeah, if you're interested in wading into thrillers, you're kind of wanting that spooky feeling, but you're not sure where to start, all good places.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm gonna hard pivot per usual.
We're back to this.
Yeah, we're back to this. We're back to this.
We haven't said it in a while.
We've talked about, we've gotten into each other's genres a little bit. And so now that we're back to talking about our like respective genres, we're pivoting. So next as a genre, I've got romance, and I've split this up by like subtypes of romance. So in the vein of fantasy, if you want to start somewhere with fantasy romance, I would suggest Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which we have talked about in depth in our genre swap episode, because this is where I started Jess.
Yes. Can't confirm. It's a good starting point.
It's a good starting point because it's again set in sort of our world adjacent. Like it's very modern. Mm-hmm. And you're just following a basically like marriage of convenience, like forced proximity sort of situation between the daughter of the leader of the vampires and the alpha of the werewolf pack. And there's also humans. So basically all of this is to maintain peace between the 3 sort of groups of people: the humans, the vampires, and the werewolves. Except the female main character, she's a vampire. Her name's Misery, which is like so cute.
So cool.
Yeah. She has her own agenda, and the werewolf alpha has his own sort of like political thing going on that sort of becomes very high stakes very quickly. And then there's a whole mystery going on between the humans. Like everything is so interconnected, but it's written in such a way that like it's sort of the backdrop for this relationship between these 2 characters who are essentially like they have their own agendas and things to worry about, but also they're both thrown into this
together,
this like marriage. Basically, this like treaty marriage. And so they just sort of have to figure it out. And so it introduces a lot of things. It introduces a lot of vampire lore, which is good if you want to get into that side of fantasy. Same with werewolves. Like, I don't know if anyone knows what knotting is, but
Definitely introduces that.
It's definitely an intro to that. So it gets into like the more like monster romance spice side of things.
It got me into monsters.
Yeah. So Bride by Ali Hazelwood is my recommended girl.
Hell yeah. Recommended all over it.
Oh my god. My recommended starting point for fantasy romance. For contemporary romance, now this was my first romance read ever. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. It's about this heiress and who essentially, she doesn't necessarily get like outright cut off. Or maybe she does. I think she does. Like she does something basically that like pisses off her wealthy stepfather.
So she pulled a Rachel Green.
Yeah, basically. And so she takes off and goes to this small little seaside town where her biological father actually used to own a bar. And she decides that she's going to move there because that's the only property that she actually, like, that's the only place she actually has to go. Because when her biological dad passed away, his property got passed on to her and her sister. And so she goes there because that's like basically to like learn the value of hard work and money and things like that. And she's there and she meets a grumpy sea captain named Brendan. And so they sort of meet, and it's sort of a like yin and yang situation, like they're polar opposites. So it's a good place to start with contemporary romance, I think, because it's very well written. There's enough plot to keep interested. Like it's a little bit like Legally Blonde, Rachel Green sort of like vibes. She's like that type of a character. And so you want to love her. And so it's easy to like fall into her story, as well as like all of the characters are three-dimensional. Like they're fully fleshed out as well as the male main characters, which I find in contemporary
doesn't always happen.
Yeah, in contemporary it doesn't always happen. Like the men end up just being there for the sole purpose of being men, and they don't really have anything else about them. But with Tessa Bailey's men, they're very like fully fleshed out and fully like they've got their own issues and things like that. It's actually a duology. The sequel is Hook, Line, and Sinker, which is about this character's sister. And so that duology as a whole, I think, is a great place to start with contemporary romance if you want something that's like light, easy to get through. It's like a feel-good type of time, but the characters are very complex and it is engaging in a way that I think is you definitely want when you're starting with a new genre, for sure. Then, if you want to start with dark romance, if you just want to dive into the like, not necessarily dark romance, but like to dip your toes into like a mafia little situation, I would recommend Kingpin's Foxglove by Bree Porter. And that one again is like normal girl gets thrown into this situation. So you're being introduced to everything as the character is being introduced to everything. And it's a little bit Beauty and the Beast-esque, like daughter paying for the sins of the father kind of thing. And it's also a duology, and so there's like a lot more to the story, and there's a lot of because it's like mafia, there's a lot of political intrigue as well, and there's like a major plot twist because she gets like thrown into this situation with this man, so that's like the romance side of it. But then also within this mafia family, there's a mole, you know, like it's sort of like an Among Us situation. And so there's that intrigue that keeps you sort of hooked, and it also doesn't get too dark. So if you're not one of those people who uses content warnings as a shopping list, but you still want to like dip your toes a little bit into some mafia or some darker sort of themes, Kingpin's Foxglove is definitely a good place to start. Because yeah, it's sort of like, that's the best way I can describe it. It's sort of Beauty and the Beast-esque, and like technically it's kidnapping, but like
it's fine.
Yeah, and so you're sort of learning about everything as the character's learning about everything. So that's a good place to like start without starting with anything too crazy. I almost said Lights Out by Nevessa Allen, but I think that one's a little bit too crazy.
That is not a beginner book.
No, that one's a little bit crazy.
That is just straight up kind of crazy.
Yeah. So I would say Kingpin's Foxglove, which again is where I started with, like, sort of darker. I don't want to fully call it a dark romance. So darker romance. And it was actually recommended to me by my coworker, who's now my very good friend, Akriti. Shout out Akriti. She recommended this to me when we like weren't close at work. Like she just knew that I was a reader, and I told her that I read romance and I was trying to get into romance, so she recommended it. And I'm reading it, I'm like, Akriti, and we've been like very good friends ever since. And so this one,
that is beautiful.
Yeah, this one also just has a very special place in my heart for that. And she and I are like, we've been friends for years, and so this is what, like, where I started with sort of darker romance, because she's like a fully fledged dark romance girly. So that's where she recommended I start. So now I'm recommending it for you to start. And then last one for romance, for historical romance, I just wanted to mention quickly The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. It's the Bridgerton series. If you wanted to dip your toes into sort of like a period piece, the Bridgerton is definitely a very digestible and easy place to start. And it's sort of a like multi-universe, because there's multiple series within this universe. So like you also fall in love with these characters and get to like follow them a little bit more. So that's definitely another good place to start. That's basically about just like high society England. This daughter of the Bridgerton family enters the society for the first time, and she ends up sort of befriending this duke who starts giving her advice on like how to like basically secure herself a proposal after he like rescues her from some skeevy guy, and romance ensues. And I just want to throw that out there too, because I feel like historical romance is a genre that I read that I like never talk about. I do like historical romance a lot. So the Bridgerton series, can't go wrong. Loved it.
Cute.
Yeah.
Well, time for a pivot.
Yet again, here we go.
Yeah. This time, we are going for contemporary. And so the disclaimer is that this is either a love it or hate it genre, unless you're Hannah and you get very slowly won over but refuse to admit it because you don't like that. However,
no.
You've given 2 5-star reads to contemporaries this year.
I have not been won over generally by contemporary. I have not.
She's getting there. She's in denial. No. She's getting there. Anyway.
No. I don't think I would say I'm generally a contemporary fan at all.
Not generally.
No.
But you're getting there.
No, I will never get there.
Yeah, that's what I said about fantasy.
Those were exceptions, not rules. Okay, I'm not there.
Okay. You'll get there. Anyway.
Give us your books.
Number 1. Heaven by Miko Kawakami. I feel like I'm mispronouncing that. I am so sorry. However, this one, I gave it like 3 stars, but it really impacted a lot of people on Book Talk. It's set in just like a regular town. I think it's Japan. And it's about these 2 school-age children basically just dealing with the effects of bullying. And it's a very touching story. And it's about how, they're a little different than the class population. And, that's what is triggering this bullying to happen. They form this sort of friendship, but they keep it under wraps because they don't want each other to be, harassed more, because they're friends with each other and are able to lean on each other and support each other through it. And basically just kind of snowballs from there. It was definitely a heavy read for a lot of people. I didn't find it as bad, but I am not a beginner. Um, so that's your content warning for this one.
I'm so sorry. This is not going to help my case, but you're describing that to me. I had that exact situation as a kid, and that ended up being my first boyfriend. That was like fully the situation. And
you might want to consider this one.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. I know this is not going to help my case, but like the way you just described it, I'm like, oh, real. And I'm like relating to just the description.
Yeah, right after you were just like, I hate contemporary.
Yeah, okay. Oh my God.
Anyway,
whatever.
That is Heaven by Miko Kawakami. It's a very sweet story, and I remember vividly the climax of it. Like, I didn't love the book, but I vividly remember the climax, and I feel like even without being like head over heels for it, I think that says a lot. And so, very impactful story, for sure. Next is Blue Sisters by Coco Malores. So this story is about a group of sisters. It's three, it's technically four. One of them is dead. And the other three are learning how to lean on each other in this period of grief. They're not very good at it, but they're figuring it out. They're figuring out how to exist in a world without the fourth sister. And it's a very personal book, especially, it showcases the relationship that siblings can have where, maybe they weren't always best friends, but, that they know that they can support each other. And, like, even if, they're not the most compatible of people, like, they've got each other's back at the end of the day, and they learn to, embrace those differences and just be like, yeah, you're kind of crazy, but I fucking love you anyway. And like the character development is beautiful, and I think it's a really good way to get into, I like to call it like a picture frame of a life, where it's just like, here's this like little slice of someone's life for a little period of time that you get to read about in detail and follow along with. And that is what this book is for this group of sisters. And so I think it's a really good place to start for contemporary, because it's not like the most intense of contemporaries. It's a little bit heavier because of, the content with, the sister and her passing. But it's also in that way relatable, because everybody has lost somebody at some point and has had to learn how to deal with that and learn how to continue living anyway. And so in that way, that is what got it onto this list for me. It's one of those situations that everyone's been through. So, and Coco Malores is just such a beautiful writer.
Oh, love that.
So, yeah, period. Last one I have for contemporary, it's a newer one. It is the opposite vibe of the last two. The last two were pretty heavy for contemporary, I will admit. However, if that's the flavor of contemporary you're leaning for, great, perfect. But if you're wanting something a little more upbeat, a little less stressy, depressy, I've got Ponder by Daniel Roberts. And Roberts. It is new. It just released, I believe, I think in February. I reviewed it. And basically imagine a road trip to the happiest place on earth, Disneyland. What more can I say? There's women, there's a lot of alcohol, There's, you know how friends can have like their own little coded language? There's that. There's Mickey fucking Mouse. It's great. I had a great time reading this one. It was a lot of fun. I don't know if it was because it was an arc when I read it. The ending just like cut off, which was weird. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a different ending in the now released book. But even if there is an ending out there that I haven't read, I still stand by this book because even with that weirdness, I still gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it that much. And it's one of those ones where it's just like, it's just a good silly goose time. Like, you're just there to have fun. And I think that's a really good way to get into contemporary, is just having fun.
That's true. I did actually, for me, like, with Ova, A Man Called Ova, like that was like, it wasn't just having fun, but like it was like a fun little time, like learning about like his life and everything like that, and like that did get me.
Yeah, that's contemporary.
All right. Well, my next genre is mystery. And I said that I was previously strictly a mystery thriller person. And so I'm just going to give you some of my favorites that I think are good to begin with. So the first one is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. And this one is about a journalist who gets an assignment to basically take a trip on this very exclusive, basically like A-list celebrities are going on this trip. Very exclusive trip. It's a cruise. So she goes on this cruise ship, and her assignment is to like observe and write about this like new exclusive trip, cruise, yacht. It's a yacht situation. And so she is there. She's with all these like A-list people, like very influential people, and she's there to basically report back. And very quickly, she meets this woman who is in the cabin next to hers, which is cabin 10. And she meets her and they chat back and forth a little bit, and then she like carries on with her night. End of the night, she witnesses this woman being thrown overboard off the boat.
Oh.
Yeah. And so she sounds the alarm and goes and like gets security and like tells, the captain and whatever. And everyone looks at her and they're like, "What are you talking about? There's no one staying in cabin 10. Dun, dun, dun. And so it's just about her trying to basically solve the mystery of this woman in cabin 10 who supposedly doesn't exist. And nice. It just unfolds from there. And it's very twisty, and there's a lot of like intrigue, and like you don't know who's lying to you. You don't know if the narrator's lying to you. Like you have no idea. And it was very gripping in a way that I think is really good for beginners for mystery, for sure. So that's my first recommendation for mystery. Now, in a different sort of mystery vibe, I want to also recommend The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And this book is basically marketed as like teenaged Criminal Minds. So there's basically all of these kids, these teenagers. It's this secret task force with the FBI of these kids who have some kind of affinity for like something useful for solving murders, basically. And that's why they're called the Naturals, because they're like, they have some kind of natural ability that makes them. And so this task force is basically tasked with solving cold cases. And our main character, she's a new recruit. It's YA. She's a new recruit, and her natural ability is profiling, like psychological profiling. She has a natural affinity for like getting in the heads of these criminals, or anyone really. And so she gets recruited, and so she ends up part of this task force. And usually they only solve cold cases, except there is a serial killer on the loose who seems to have some kind of an affinity with this new recruit. And so they end up on their first active case, trying to figure out what's going on. So things unfold from there. And this one, the way that Jennifer Lynn Barnes writes, they're very short chapters. It's YA, so it's very like easy to fly through. It's also just very interesting in terms of like the psychological aspect of it. And also the other members of the task force like have different sort of abilities. And so the way that they all like work together and all the personalities involved and everything, like, you know, I'm a sucker for the characters. And so I just really enjoyed that sort of like subplot of it of like, yeah, they're like all this crazy shit is going on, but also these are just kids who are still growing up and learning how to be humans. And I thought that was interesting. And so I think that it's like engaging enough that it's a good place to start with mystery, especially if you just want like an intriguing, silly, goofy time. Speaking of silly, goofy time, if you want an intro to cozy mysteries, I'm going to just quickly shout out Louisiana Longshot by Jana De Leon, which is about a CIA agent who goes undercover into hiding in this small town in Louisiana to hide from an arms dealer who has a hit out on her. And she's supposed to be laying low, but on the first day that she's there, a dog digs up a human bone in her backyard. And so she gets thrown into solving this mystery to clear her name. And then she meets these two little old ladies, and they end up becoming a crime-solving trio that's always causing trouble. And so that is a good place to start, just because with cozy mysteries, they're fairly low stakes, but there are still plot twists and intrigue and things like that. But it's also like very feel good and like the kind of books that you like curl up with, and they're super short, so they're easy to get through, and there's like 30 books in the series. And so like it's a good place to start for that, I think, if you want just like something that's not super heavy that you can just like get into and really enjoy, and also have some like intrigue sort of in there. And then last one, we have Finley Donovan is Killing It by Ella Cosimano, which is about an author. We read this one together and we did an annotation swap. So my copy of Finley Donovan has both of our annotations in it, and I still look at it every so often because I love it. And Finley Donovan basically is about an author who is discussing her next book in a restaurant with her agent, I think. And she's a mystery writer, but someone overhears her and thinks that she's actually talking about a real murder that she's committing. And so this person overhears her, thinks that she's a hit woman, and leaves her a note hiring her to kill someone for her. And things go very awry from there.
Yep.
And it's just, Finley Donovan is just so funny and so chaotic that like you literally never know what's going to happen next. And there's sort of like a moral dilemma going on at the same time that she's a single mom just trying to raise her kids. And so it's very real and very raw, but also the most insane plot ever. And so I think that it has a lot of entertainment value that is good for like getting into mystery, I think, for sure.
Nice. All right. So that is so many different flavors of fiction for you to wet your toes in.
Ew, why'd you say it like that?
I don't know. My feet are cramping. I think that's why. Anyway, on to nonfiction.
Yes, we never talk about nonfiction.
We don't. And I am thriving in it right now. On a completely separate note, I'm reading a nonfiction book that is, it's not only scratching my brain, it is wringing it out like a wet dishcloth, okay?
Oh my god.
Oh. Yeah, it's about human skin books.
Ew, okay.
Anyway.
Okay, give us
That's
your
for once you have a little bit more experience. If you are new to nonfiction, you need to start with Under the Knife, A History of Surgery Through 28 Remarkable Operations by Arnold van der Laar. It sounds dense. I admit that. It sounds like a lot, it is not. Okay. Arnold Vandeleur, he really breaks down medical terminology so that you can understand it, even if you've never taken a medical terminology course in your life. And so he's a real one for that, straight up. Okay. I read this book the first half before I went to school for a medical course, and then I read the second half as I was taking a medical terminology course. And it definitely did change the way that I read the book, because I would read these words and then I'd like define them in my head, and then he would break it down into like layman's terms, and I was like, oh, studying. So that was a little cheat for myself. But basically, he goes over the origins of certain types of surgeries, where they started, how they, grew with the discovery of newer medicine, as well as what I thought was really interesting is he would tell you about the case of, where it started, and then he'd go, okay, but if modern medicine was around when this person needed it, here's what could have happened to them. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, what would have happened to Marie Antoinette if she had access to medicine in the 21st century? Different story. And I thought that was fascinating. Also, did not know that there was a time when circumcisions were reversed. So if you want to know more about that, Under the Knife, A History of Surgery Through 28 Remarkable Operations by Arnold Vandeleur. It's a mouthful of a title, but it is one of the most memorable nonfiction books I have ever read. And he's also just such a funny author. Like, he makes these stories, like, legitimately entertaining to the point where, like, even if you have no, like, medical curiosity at all, this is still a fun book.
Nice.
Yeah. So, love it to bits. I've been recommending it to my coworkers. One of my coworkers is actually a doctor in Mexico, and she moved here, and I told her about it, and she's like, that actually sounds great. I need to read it right now. So, Under the Knife, Arnold Vandeleur. If you're looking for more of a memoir type deal, but you want it to be, someone that you might have grown up watching on TV, that you're vaguely familiar with, that, you heard about on Book Talk for a while. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Ah, yes. I have this. I haven't read it, though.
Yes. I have read it. If you don't know who Jeanette McCurdy is, she was a child actress. She starred in iCarly. She played Sam Pickett in iCarly, and then went on to play also Sam Pickett in Sam and Cat. And essentially, her mom kind of pressured her into this, child stardom. And so it goes over, her life, what her relationship with her mom was like, her struggles with things like mental health and eating disorders, and, the process that she went through in trying to, take control of her own life. And so it was a good memoir. I really enjoyed it. And, the fact that it is someone that we in this current day are relatively familiar with definitely adds that, societal intrigue, where it's just like, oh, what happens, behind the curtain of these child actors and actresses, because, toddler and tiaras is not all razzle dazzle. So it kind of lets you into that behind the scenes feeling, which has its own kind of, macabre intrigue in a way. So yeah, it's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And if that title doesn't, have you questioning what happened there, maybe you should.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one is also a memoir, but it does not read like one. And so if you're hesitant on nonfiction, but you're like kind of curious, but you're not sure if you can get into it, this book reads like fiction. Okay. It is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, and it does not feel like fiction. You forget that everything in that book actually happened. You completely forget because it is just so bizarre, and it's so unimaginable that things like this actually happen. But you know what? There's a redneck somewhere.
Oh my God.
His name is Rex, okay?
The dad is a guy. He's an interesting guy for sure.
He's a guy. And so, yeah, that book, you completely forget that what you're reading about is somebody's retelling of their entire life. It's incredible. There are relationships that are just so moving. There's, the upended feeling that you get being a child and being moved to another town. If you've experienced that, you know what that's like, and you know how scary it can be. And the way that Jeanette Walls, goes into that, and how, even in the turbulence, that she could just rely on her sisters because that's really all she had, because her parents were not that reliable, stable force in her life, so her and her sisters had to be. And so, yeah, it's a very entertaining story. It's a very moving story. It's one of Hannah's top books ever.
Mm-hmm.
She has my copy right now
Yep.
because she's going to pre-annotate it for my reread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book, and it legitimately makes you forget you're reading nonfiction.
Which is like the best way to get into nonfiction.
It is. It's a great, great way to open that door. And it makes you kind of curious about, if that's nonfiction, what else is nonfiction?
What else is out there?
Yeah, if that's possible, I'm sure something else could be. So it makes you curious into the genre, and I really like that about it.
Nice. Yeah, I loved that book. That was my 12th grade novel study project was on that, and that's actually what made me want to go into English literature. English literature was not originally my major. Fun fact. Lore drop for you. I've actually changed my degree twice. But yeah, that novel is what did it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful novel. I recommend it to everyone, especially beginners for nonfiction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So those are our beginner books. So just super quick, just so I have it here in case I want to leave it in. So my beginner books were for fantasy: Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, Air Awakens by Elise Kova, The Bonds That Tie by Jay Bree, and Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. My beginner books for romance were Bride by Allie Hazelwood, It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, Kingpin's Foxglove by Bree Porter, and The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. For mystery, my beginner books are The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, Louisiana Longshot by Jana De Leon, and Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano.
And my beginner books for thriller were Anything by Minka Kent, Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak, and Where You End by Abbott Kaller. My beginner books for contemporary were Heaven by Miko Kawakami, Blue Sisters by Coco Malores, and Ponder by Daniel Roberts. And for nonfiction beginner books, I've got Under the Knife, A History of Surgery Through 28 Remarkable Operations by Arnold Vandelar, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls.
And there we have it. So any of those genres
Woo.
that you want to start with, if this inspires you to start with any of those genres, tell us.
You've got no excuse now.
Email me.
Email Hannah. Message us on Instagram or Threads at badlyannotedpod, email at badlyannotedpod@gmail.com. Tell us if you like them, if you have other beginner books, if we get you into a genre. If you read a book because of us, please tell us. I will freak the heck out. And with that, kindest of regards, best wishes.
Sincerely, Jess and Hannah.